Hello everyone, and here we have a new story. Before we get to that, I want to ask you to subscribe, like, and be sure to write comments in order to participate in the development of the community. Write how to improve my community, current topics in the stories you are interested in, and much more. I read and listen to all the comments. People write me stories by mail from different countries. There are problems with translation. I apologize for this. I will work on it and try to fix these errors. I want to thank everyone for their support and the people who wrote to me by mail. Broadcast news stories. New videos on my channel are published once every 2 days at 7 p.m. Don't forget to put a bell in order not to miss new videos. And now let's go. I want to tell you my story. I didn't even know who to share my tragedy with, but I saw this community and here I am writing. Okay, let's get started. I'm 30 years old. My wife is 28 years old. This is our first marriage. We have been living together for 10 years. We don't have any children yet. I grew up in an ordinary, prosperous, decent family. I have an older sister. After graduating from high school, I went to 𝐂𝐿𝐴 and entered the university. First money earned parties, I partied. Dated a few girls. But for some reason, it didn't come to sex. I don't know why. Maybe that's how I was raised. I've never imposed anything in a relationship. I was completely absorbed in my studies and work. In my second year, I met my future wife. In general, everything is very banal. We started renting an apartment together and we started a family life. I was completely satisfied with my wife. Everything was great with us in sex. My wife was a housewife. What else does a man need? Of course, she's not a fashion model, but she was very nice. In general, everything suited me. There have never been any serious quarrels between them. Even if we quarreled, we reconciled on the same day. And my wife has always been the initiator of our reconciliation. I was very proud and never asked for forgiveness. 3 years later, both returned to their hometown. Both got good jobs. Life in the capital is not easy. First, we rented an apartment again, but we got stronger financially very quickly. Bought a nice house. We bought 2 cars. In general, we worked and earned together. In fact, I was the only one who wanted children. My wife didn't seem to mind, but she kept putting it off for later. She wanted to live for herself. The topic of children was raised less and less every year. We only had sex on holidays. We work around the clock. In our free time, we sleep and watch TV shows. We spent a lot of time together at home and at work. Both began to get tired of each other. Over time, we found out that it's not easy for my wife to get pregnant. She went to the gynecologist. She had women's problems. My wife started crying a lot. She was afraid that I would leave her. I said I would never leave her in my life because it's not manly. I considered it a betrayal. We've been through so much together. I always thought that we lived soul to soul and didn't hide anything from each other. She always said everything straight. She said that if she had fallen in love with someone else, she would have told me right away, so as not to torment each other. On the topic of adultery, we often joked and laughed together. I very rarely drank alcohol, but if I was drinking, it drove me crazy. Yes, there is such a sin behind me. I could flirt with other girls. I could have cruelly insulted my wife and humiliated her, but I never raised my hand to her. My wife also rarely drank alcohol, but I've never seen her drunk. But now the culmination of the family ideal has come. In the spring, I went to a bar with friends and got drunk until I lost consciousness. For the first time in 10 years, we had a scandal. I didn't even spend the night at home. In the morning, we had our first conversation about a possible divorce. I knew I'd screwed up. After that, 2 weeks of normal existence. We didn't even talk. We just walked around the house in silence. Everyone sat down to dinner and went to bed. Another week passed and everything seemed to be getting better. But I felt guilty about my wife. My wife is not as outspoken as she used to be. She constantly reminded me of the day I got drunk at the bar. There was no sex in our life at all. We just constantly devoted time to work. I dreamed that my wife would forgive me. I became a good husband and gave gifts every time, but I still couldn't get my old relationship back. My wife began to visit her friends often. One day I found out that she went to some fortune teller. One day she comes up to me and says that she is very guilty in front of me. My wife started crying a lot. Only one thought immediately came to my mind. I immediately asked my wife, "Did you cheat on me or something like that?" She tells me it's even worse. She not only cheated on me, but also got pregnant by someone else. Then a void formed in my head. I sat and smoked for 40 minutes, staring at one point. I couldn't come to my senses for a very long time. But for some reason, there was no rage and bitterness. I always thought that if my wife cheated on me, I would kill her. But I felt empty. It's good that I restrained myself and didn't get drunk, because then it would be a completely different story. Come on, I say, tell me everything as it is. Through his wife's tears, I realized the following, that after my visit to the bar, she really wanted to divorce me. Then my wife cooled down, but resentment is firmly stuck in her head. After that, a month later, we quarreled again. After the quarrel, my wife went to her friend, complained to her and drank a lot of alcohol herself. To return home, she called a taxi. So my wife had sex with a taxi driver. At that moment, the details of this story were like in a fog. I sat and thought about how to live with it further. Then I found out that she was pregnant in the second month. I was shocked. It was enough for me that my wife cheated on me. She also got pregnant by some taxi driver. I was just torn from the inside out. The next day, I thought it over carefully. I told my wife that I understand everything. Anger, resentment. Maybe I would have forgiven her, but I won't raise a taxi driver's child. Because when I look at the baby that was born, I will always remember how she had sex with a taxi driver, how he touched my wife, and so on. This is too much. I immediately filed for divorce. By the way, I found this taxi driver. I found his number in my ex-wife's mobile phone contacts. I called him several times. During the conversation, I found out where he lives. One dark night when his car was parked outside the house, I smashed all his windows and punched the wheels. I left him a note that if he goes to the police, his wife will find out that he's cheating on her. By the way, the taxi driver has 3 children. Maybe it's not too much revenge, but it became much easier for me. He will know how to sleep with married girls. That's the whole story. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the news story. Now let's move on to the opinion of the author of the channel. The opinion of the author of the channel. Before I say a word, I want to wish our hero strength and spiritual healing. Yes, I was shocked by it. How can you give yourself to an unfamiliar taxi driver? I wonder if the taxi driver will take responsibility for the child. Friends, what do you say about this? It seems to me that this guy's wife just went crazy. Anyway, dude, you shouldn't get depressed. Because your wife is definitely not needed by anyone else. And even with a child, God grant that the taxi driver will help her financially. I think karma has caught up with her. She will feel the punishment for her mistakes. If you have watched to the end, I want to say thank you very much. I love you all. Thank you for joining me on this exciting journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. I appreciate your support and encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this story. Your participation and feedback are invaluable for shaping our content and promoting mutual understanding and community growth. Until we meet again.